So picture this, a little girl screaming, blood running down her knee, and me kneeling in the dirt trying to hold her still, when suddenly a shadow falls over me and this guy in a suit barks, "Don't touch my daughter." Like, sir, your kid is literally bleeding. That was the moment my life got hijacked. Yeah, not exactly a good meet-up people fantasize about. I didn't wake up that morning thinking I'd get into it with some billionaire dad. I woke up thinking about how I was late on rent, how my fridge had 2 yogurts and a sad bag of baby carrots, and how I desperately needed my next paycheck. So there I was at the park, sipping the most tragic cup of lukewarm coffee you can imagine, trying to get through the day. I'm people watching because free therapy, hello, and I noticed this little girl on the monkey bars. She was so determined, pink sneakers kicking, curls bouncing, tiny face scrunched up like she was training for the Olympics. And then she lost her grip, fell hard onto the mulch, and my heart just dropped into my stomach. Before I could think, I was on my feet. Coffee spilled everywhere, ripped to my last $2. I rushed over, knelt down, and there she was, tears streaming down her cheeks, clutching her knee. The scrape was bad enough to sting, but not hospital bad. Still, she was panicked, and when kids panic, they need calm. That's my thing. I went into automatic nanny mode. Hey, sweetheart, you're okay. Let me see. It's not too bad, I promise. We'll clean it up, maybe get you a cool Band-Aid, huh? My voice was soft, soothing, like it had been 100 times before with other kids. I even started digging in my bag for the little first aid kit I always carry because, children are walking chaos. That's when I felt it. A presence, a heat, a shadow so sharp it cut through the moment like a blade. I looked up and wow, tall, broad shoulders, perfect suit that probably cost more than my car, not a single hair out of place. He looked like he belonged in some glossy magazine ad for luxury watches, and his face, pure storm cloud. Angry storm cloud. He swooped in, literally snatched the girl into his arms like I was some stranger off the street about to kidnap her, and snapped at me in this voice that could freeze lava. "You don't touch my daughter. I don't even know you." I just blinked. Excuse me? Did I not just keep your kid from having a meltdown? My cheeks burned hot, my heart was pounding, but all that came out of my mouth was this muttered, sarcastic little dagger. Wow. Okay, dad of the year. And I walked off, trying to pretend I wasn't humiliated, but inside, I was fuming. Who was that guy? And who did he think he was, treating me like some creep when I was just trying to help? Whatever. I told myself I'd never see him again. He'd just be one of those rude strangers you tell your best friend about later, like, "Girl, you won't believe this man I met today," except, plot twist, I did see him again. Fast forward a couple of days, and I get this email from my nanny agency. Big client, high profile, they need someone fast, someone good. And obviously, my broke self was like, yes, sign me up. Where do I pack my bags? I was already daydreaming about what kind of fancy pantry this house would have. Probably snacks I couldn't pronounce and juice boxes more expensive than my rent. So I pull up to this massive mansion, like driveway longer than my street, massive, and I'm standing there with my suitcase trying to look professional, but also silently praying they have Wi-Fi strong enough to stream Netflix. The door opens, and there he is. Mr. Dad of the Year himself, Dylan. His jaw tightened so fast I swear I heard it click. "You?" he said like I was a curse word. My stomach dropped and my brain went, oh no freaking way, because of course the universe would do me like this. He looked like he wanted to slam the door in my face, but the agency must have told him I was the best, because I am, and his daughter needed me whether he liked it or not. So after a moment of pure inner suffering, he stepped aside and let me in. He showed me the guest room. It was gorgeous, by the way, nicer than my whole apartment. But before I could even breathe, he hit me with this list of rules. No personal interactions, no wandering the house, no overstepping. "You're here for Sophie, nothing else," he said in that same ice-cold tone. And me? I smiled politely, nodded, did the whole yes sir routine, but inside my head, I was screaming, great, this is going to be fun. I threw myself into the job like my life depended on it, because honestly, it kind of did. Rent wasn't going to pay itself, and the last thing I needed was to get fired by Mr. Tall, dark, and miserable on day one. So I decided, keep it professional, strictly business. Dylan and I had already gotten off on the wrong foot, and I wasn't exactly eager to repeat that disaster. Lucky for me, Sophie made it easy. That little girl was pure sunshine wrapped in curls and giggles. Sweet, funny, curious. She was the kind of kid you just want to protect, and the more time I spent with her, the more it broke my heart how starved she was for affection. I mean, she was polite and well-mannered, sure, but the way her face lit up when I read her an extra bedtime story or braided her hair before school, that told me everything. Pretty soon, Bedtime stories turned into whispered giggles under the covers. Math homework turned into full-on dance parties at the kitchen table, and Sophie was clinging to me like I was her anchor. I wasn't just the nanny anymore, I was her safe space. And secretly, she was becoming mine too. Meanwhile, Dylan was like a ghost in his own house, always coming and going, Bluetooth glued to his ear, eyes glued to whatever crisis was happening in his billion-dollar world. I barely saw him, except for the occasional stiff nod in the hallway, which honestly was fine by me. The man gave off do not disturb energy 24/7. And as long as his daughter was thriving, I figured we could happily exist in separate universes under the same roof. For a while it worked, until the past showed up literally on the doorstep. I'll never forget it. I was in the foyer, helping Sophie with her backpack when the door swung open and in walked this woman. Beautiful, polished, expensive perfume trailing behind her, smile so warm it could melt butter. And she went straight for me, not Dylan. She introduced herself like we were old friends and started pouring her heart out, telling me how she regretted leaving, how she wanted a second chance to be in her daughter's life. She was charming, and honestly, I'm a sucker for people who look like they're trying. Did I believe her? Not really. But I saw the regret in her eyes, and I listened, because that's what I do. But before I could even think of what to say, Dylan appeared. And when I tell you his eyes could have lit the whole house on fire, who? What are you doing here? Who let you in? His voice wasn't just sharp, it was sharp and broken all at once. I froze. I had a split second to either lie or own it, and of course I blurted the truth. I did. His jaw clenched, his voice went up, and I braced myself for the storm. He yelled, furious, demanding how I could let her near Sophie. My stomach twisted, my cheeks burned, and I thought for sure I was about to get thrown out on the spot. But then Sophie's mom, calm as ever, stepped in, smiled like this was all some little misunderstanding, and said it was her fault. She even had the nerve to smirk at me as she walked out like she dropped a bomb and was waiting for it to go off. Later that night, when the house was quiet and Sophie was finally asleep, I found Dylan sitting in the kitchen, alone. God, he looked so hot in his t-shirt and sweatpants. Too bad for that attitude of his anyway. No phone, no armor, just him and a glass of something strong. For the first time, he talked to me. Not at me, not through me, but to me. He told me about the night Sophie's mom left, how he'd stood in the nursery staring at their daughter, wondering how he was supposed to do this alone, how he buried himself in work because it was easier than dealing with the loneliness. His voice cracked on some of it. His hands trembled. And me? I just listened. For once, I wasn't the nanny. I was just a person sitting across from another person who was breaking, and it changed something in me. Suddenly, Dylan wasn't just Mr. Dad of the Year with the cold glare. He was human, flawed, hurting, real. After that, things shifted in these tiny, almost unnoticeable ways. Dylan started showing up for dinner once in a while, and instead of eating in silence, he'd actually join in Sophie's silly games. Sophie drew a crayon picture of the three of us, me, her, and her dad, standing under a giant yellow sun holding hands. She labeled it, My Family, and when she proudly taped it to the fridge, Dylan and I just exchanged this awkward little laugh. Neither of us said anything, but I could feel something unspoken hanging in the air. Warmth, hope, something I wasn't ready to name. But just when I thought maybe, this could settle into some kind of new normal, everything shattered. Sophie's teacher called. Her voice was shaking, panicked. She said a woman had come to the school, claimed to be Sophie's mom, and picked her up. My stomach dropped like I'd been thrown off a building. My hands went cold, my ears rang. I barely processed anything after that because all I could think was, Sophie was gone. Dylan's world collapsed right in front of me, and in that moment, every stupid rule he'd ever laid out, don't touch this, don't cross that line, don't get involved, none of it mattered anymore. The only thing that mattered was finding Sophie. You ever watch somebody who's always so put together just crumble right in front of you? Like the guy who's usually polished down to the last cufflink suddenly can't even figure out how to breathe without falling apart? That was Dylan. The moment we realized Sophie was gone, it was like every wall he'd spent years building around himself just collapsed all at once. He wasn't the cold, sharp man I'd met in the park, or even the stiff, rule-loving boss I thought I'd been working for. He was a dad whose whole world had been ripped out of his arms, restless, frantic, pacing the halls like he could somehow walk his way into a miracle. His hair was a mess, his jaw unshaven, eyes red like he hadn't blinked in hours. He barked at the private investigator he'd hired, yelled at the cops, cursed into the phone at anyone who didn't have answers, and when he finally ran out of people to scream at, he screamed at himself. And me? I just stayed close, because what else could I do? Watching him unravel like that, watching the man who always had control lose it so completely, was terrifying and heartbreaking all at once. Hours turned into a full night, still no word, still no sign of Sophie, and then Dylan just disappeared for a bit like he couldn't stand being in his own skin another second. When he came stumbling through the front door, I knew. The sharp scent hit me before he even spoke. He'd been drinking. A lot. His steps were uneven, his tie hanging loose around his neck, his shirt untucked like he'd been in a fight with himself and lost. I ran over before he could hit the floor, and I swear I'd never seen him like that. So broken, so human, so far from the untouchable man he liked everyone to believe he was. "I got you," I whispered, looping my arm around him and guiding him upstairs, every step slow, like I was leading a wounded soldier back to safety. He barely resisted, too tired, too empty. I helped him out of his jacket, tried to settle him onto the bed, and then he looked at me. Not the usual glare, not the guarded stare, but something raw. His eyes were glassy, wet, like every emotion he'd been running from his whole life had caught up to him in that second. His voice cracked, softer than I'd ever heard it. "You're so beautiful." I froze. My brain screamed, what the hell is happening right now? But before I could even process, before I could take a step back, his lips found mine. And God, it wasn't just a kiss. It was desperate, aching, like he was clinging to me the way he couldn't cling to anything else. And the crazy part? I kissed him back. Against every ounce of logic, against every rule I'd made for myself, I let myself fall into that moment with him. My hands tangled in his shirt, his arms wrapped around me like he was afraid I'd vanish too. And for one night, just one, we let every wall, every line, every don't and shouldn't and never disappear. That night, we weren't Boss and Nanny. We weren't two broken people pretending to have it all figured out. We were just us. But then morning came, and reality hit like a truck. The sunlight pouring through the curtains didn't feel warm. It felt like a spotlight exposing everything we'd done. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might wake him. Dylan was still asleep, face softer than I'd ever seen it, but I couldn't stay. Panic clawed at me. What had I done? What did this mean? So I did the only thing I knew how to do when life got complicated. I ran. I slipped out of his bed, out of his room, and pretended like nothing had happened. When he finally woke, his head foggy and his memory hazy, he didn't push. He didn't ask. His focus was all on Sophie, and I told myself that was for the best. Days passed like slow torture until finally, she was found. Safe, in one piece. I swear, the moment Dylan held her again, the relief that came out of him nearly broke me in two. His whole body shook, his arms wrapped around her like he'd never let go again. I just stood there, watching this man crumble and heal all in the same breath, and for the first time, I realized how deep I'd fallen into this family that wasn't even mine. And then came the quiet. After the storm, after the panic, there was silence. It was just me and Dylan in the kitchen, Sophie finally asleep upstairs. He looked at me, really looked at me, like he was seeing me for the first time since that night. "Why did you run?" he asked, voice low, steady, eyes searching mine. My chest tightened. I wanted to lie, to dodge, to brush it off, but I couldn't. My truth spilled out before I could stop it. "Because I thought I overstepped. Because I thought you didn't need me like that." For a second, I thought he'd laugh, or worse, agree, but he didn't. Instead, he closed the space between us and kissed me again. This time wasn't desperate. It wasn't messy. It was sure, certain. His hands cupped my face, his words brushing against my lips. "You're wrong. No one has ever loved Sophie the way you do. We need you. I need you." It was messy, yeah. Complicated, definitely. But real. More real than anything I'd ever felt. And as if life hadn't thrown enough curveballs, Sophie's mom showed up again. Tearful, apologetic, claiming she'd made a mistake, begging for another chance. Dylan's walls slammed back up, anger flashing hot, ready to push her out for good. But me? I couldn't help it. I saw Sophie's face in all of this, not just the past mistakes. So I became the bridge, the one who convinced him to allow co-parenting, not for his ex's sake, but for Sophie's. And somehow, after a long fight, Dylan agreed. Not happily, not easily, but because deep down, he knew Sophie deserved it. And so, there we were, full circle, walking back through the same park where this whole messy story began. Sophie skipping between us, her little hands in both of ours, her laughter ringing through the air like music. Dylan looked over at me, and this time there was no glare, no guard, no anger, just certainty. Just him and me and the little girl who had tied our lives together forever. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a job anymore. This was home.